turn this meeting over to a lower power.
I like it, man. That's what we
That's
are, man. Lower powers hoping to
that's
invoke
right.
higher power somewhere.
That's right. That's right. Well, what's all you work with what you have. That I want to say what jumped out at me was Alan is the it's funny how after you do the broad strokes, the details. The one that jumped out at me at first, I thought I was just making a joke, but then I thought, no, I think I actually think this is it. This is pertinent. When he says suddenly, he had this insight suddenly, and I thought, I don't think we have insight suddenly. And then I thought, this is what goes on in my head. I go, yeah, we do. A lot of times we get the stuff it's stirring around in there, and then I mean, how many of we all have
Oh,
stories that go like, oh shit, you know, I
yeah.
got it. You know, or you sleep on it, you wake up with it in the morning. It's like, yeah,
Very true.
we're just doing the raw material and putting it in there to cook, and suddenly there's a cake. Well, yeah, forgiveness. Forgiveness is tricky. It's like because it seems because we have so many cultural assumptions about it, I think, for one thing. Um, and and I like the way Alan starts with that in the chapter, as a matter of fact, where he talks about he says because I definitely identified the moment I read first time I read, you know, that forgiveness is a subject that divides us quickly into two camps. You know, it does split us, and that's forgiveness as a virtue, and forgiveness as an unreachable ideal. Um, I like to add a third one just because I like to cause trouble, but it's like the third option I have is that it's because it's more grounded and practical too. It's forgiveness. It's an option worth considering. Okay, because one of the things, and I've said this as we've talked about this chapter before, it's like one of the things I think we need to get in order to give ourselves the freedom and the power to really genuinely forgive is we have to begin with understanding we don't have to. You know, because most of us we've grown up in a world where there's some messages somewhere where it really is a you're supposed to, if you're a good person, you're forgiving people. Um, it's and you know, and it comes out in sometimes detail. Um, I got a lot of that with my um relationship with my mother, because people would knew that I did not. My mother and I were not on good terms, and and people were always they were always selling me on I need to be different. I need to forgive her. I need to go do this. I need to do that. One of the things I became aware of, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but one of the things I became aware of is, I mean, she was old, but she also was not senile, was did not have dementia, and but I noticed that um, when somebody gets old, all of a sudden, all the responsibility and we everybody else thinks, well, the younger person, the child, the adult child in this case, is responsible for that relationship. You got to, you know, you got to call your mother. You have to go see your mother. You have to do that. And I always just said, she could call me. She never calls me. She doesn't do that. She could come see me, but she doesn't. You know, not that I wanted her to, but but then I'll wrap this up in this direction. My roommate, basically my office wife, Gary, that we've spent 28 years in the same office together. Um, he was on the front lines of just wanting me to treat my mother differently, and and then I found out it was because he knew that she made really good uh, peanut butter cookies, and he just wanted me to make up with her so we could get some peanut butter cookies. So, you know, I'm still trying to forgive him. Okay, let me see what I want to say about this chapter. I said last time, I love on the very first page of it where he talks about, you talk about Alan, I can't remember the exact quote, but you use the phrase genuinely useful. I like things that are practical, applicable to helping us to move forward. And that's, and with curiosity. I think that's one of the things I want to say, because it's going to be relevant to what else I have to say, is I love simplifying things. And one of the ways to simplify sort of what we do in our recovery, and what we do as helping other people in recovery, is we focus on moving forward, not being stuck, moving forward with curiosity, and one of the things that stops us very often is to try to move forward. Well, you move forward without curiosity, and you're gonna have a lot more fear, is what I think about that. So that part of the thing is we try to, I think this is a group effort too. We try to support each other into saying, we move forward, well, just generally about recovery, but because recovery is exciting. You don't know what's coming next. We really do let go of the idea. Hopefully, we let go as best we can, that 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 we can control what's going to happen, and or that we can know what's going to happen. I can't remember the exact wording of it, but I have one of my little nutshells says we can freak ourselves out. We can freak ourselves out much better with the future than we can predict it. And that's what a lot of us do. We have that, friend of mine calls it the director of fiction, and it lives in her brain, and just makes up all kinds of scary stories and tells her. And we all have some version of that, and we tend to, even though it's very seldom, if ever, good with its prophecy, we still tune into it when it speaks. I'm not sure why that is, but but anyway, I'll go back to the genuinely useful to me in this setting means moving forward with curiosity, and practically. Uh, uh, One more thing about the beginning, which is to be, if we're, and I think this point is made pretty clearly with you can remind me in a minute, Alan. It's like, but that if we're pushed, yeah, you said talked about this. If we're pushed, and actually push towards forgiveness, not by other people or by ourselves, because a lot of times our little should monsters in our own head are telling us what we have to do, and we're not okay unless we do this. It's like, and when you pointed out that basically, you know, that's going to backfire. It's like, when and I don't know if you went to the specifics of that, but I think about, like, what's going to happen if I push myself with that. Well, I'm going to, rather than becoming forgiving, I'm going to be more angry, or I'm going to crumble in shame. And I'm pretty sure the one you pointed out in the book or the forgiveness will happen, or you'll do the forgiveness, but it'll be disingenuous. It's not going to be real, and that's a waste of time and effort. So, um, want people to know, again, back to what I said before, it's an option worth considering. So now, okay, emotional sobriety in a nutshell is in my opinion that piece of the Bill's letter that is about where there is distress, where you have distress, look beneath it, and you will find unrealistic expectations, unenforceable rules. I love the fact that he does, the details of how this is written are beautiful. He doesn't say, look and see if there are unrealistic expectations or unenforceable rules. He's, and there are not a lot of things you can make these declarative statements about. I don't think that are going to be accurate, but I think this one is. He makes it real clear. No, if I'm in distress, there are unrealistic expectations. In my job, if I because I know when I bring that subject up, or if I use that with clients sometimes, and I'll refer to that, I'll say that, and and initially when people are first getting used to this idea, they'll say they're as distressed as they can possibly be, and I'll say, well, let's look for the unrealistic expectations. It's like, nope, I don't have any. All my expectations are realistic. It's like, well, no, no, they're not. But we'll get to that down the line. There's two ways that we do this unrealistic thing. One is forward, one is backwards. The unenforceable rules for the future is pretty easy. I have unrealistic expectations of what you, Alan, are going to, how you're going to talk to me, or how you're going to treat me, or what you're going to do as we go forward in our relationship. And this is simple, not easy, but the simple part of that is that's simpler to rectify, because I can change that, and I can actually, it's preventive. I can keep myself from that distress by readjusting or adjusting my expectations. The other one is the one that's the crazy making one, because goes to the past. And here's what the thinking is: we go inside, we put our ear up somebody's head, listen what's going on. It says, we say, I can't remember exactly how Alan says it, but it's if we're talking about just unenforceable rules, it's, I'll be okay if this happens, or if this is the way it is. But when we're talking about the past, uh, it's I will be okay when that did not happen. I'm going to say that sentence again. That I would be okay when that thing we're talking about happened in the past. It did not happen. And it's like, people laugh about that, and they'll say, well, it's like, no, but that's how stuck we are when we're doing that. I will be okay when Alan had not said that to me. you know, well, did he say it to you? Yes, he said it to me. But now I don't. We're not literally thinking we can change. But what we're doing is emotionally keeping ourselves stuck, because we're still waiting for that. We're waiting for the past to change, and this is about acceptance purely. And it's like, and is really one of the most important ingredients in forgiveness anyway, is just acceptance of what is real, what is the facts. And that is, um, we can't change that. And so basically I can stand there and insist that the past change for as long as I want to do that. That's my choice. And believe me, I've done that for long periods of time in my life, depending on the circumstance. And I know I'm not alone in this room, but um, the, learning the lesson that basically, once something has, I mean, this is seems stupid, it's so simplistic. Once something has happened, uh, it happened. It's not, we're not going to change that. And it's like we can it's okay. We can talk about our feelings. We can talk about how disappointed we are in that. We can talk about how much it upsets us, or how much we wish it was not the case. But if we're still finding ourselves in the distress, whatever brand of distress that is, look inside. You're going to find an unrealistic expectation, an unenforceable rule, and it can go forward or backwards. But a lot of times the ones we get stuck with are the ones that go backwards. So just be aware of those, and see if you can identify some of those in your day-to-day life. Because when I started thinking in these terms, it was not hard for me to identify them, because there were quite a lot of them. And so when one of the, and so believe me, I'm building up to more about forgiveness, but it's like one of the things that happens when we get into that kind of thinking, I need the past to change for me to, I need the past to change. I need other people to change. I need, whatever other things to change other than myself. Then what that does is it takes us to a very familiar place for lots of us. Certainly for me, it was, um, it's a victim stance. And I don't mean martyrdom. I mean just victim. Victim being very, very practically defined as a victim is somebody who believes how I am doing is determined by what happens to me. So, so it seems perfectly reasonable to most people in our society. But what we all know in here, which is because it's the core of our recovery, the truth is how I am doing at any given time is determined by how I respond to what happens to me, or that responsibility. And one of the things that I've talked about here with that when I've talked about the flow of emotions and perceptions, that EIEIO thing is the idea that we're responsible for how we're going to outwardly respond to it, but we also, I love this part, and I don't think I've had this part, but just for the last few years. It's been a while. I didn't have this earlier. We're also responsible for how we interpret whatever is happening to us. We get to we can and it's a hard work to do this, but I can actually change the storyline. I can change how I interpret these things. And I'll just there's lots of different ways, but I'll just use my favorite example because it works for me on a day-to-day basis. If if I choose, and I believe it's good to have beliefs to guide us. The beliefs don't have to be objective truth. They just need to be something we that can be, again, practically useful. If I choose to believe, and I do, and do I think this is absolutely true? I have no way of knowing. I believe that one of the main purposes of my life, or human life, is to learn. So just that alone can reframe so much, because that means that when something happens that is distressing to me, when something happens that is absolutely the opposite of what I want to happen, then what happens, if I practice that new way of interpreting, I actually get, with repetition, I get into the place where becomes an automatic response that this is an opportunity to learn something, so that I'm thinking about what can I learn from this situation? Now, I always like to point out this because this is just a pet peeve of mine. We most all of us have said this, and I'll probably say it again tomorrow or whatever, but we'll say something happens and people go like, "I wonder what I'm supposed to learn from that." Okay, and go, and something bothered me about that for a long time, and I finally figured it out, that it was like, first of all, s- wonder what I'm supposed to learn. I'm going to think, according to whom, who gave you that assignment? And people could just say, the broad picture of that's what God gave that. But the thing that bothers me the most about that is it implies that there's only one thing you're supposed to learn. I wonder what I'm supposed to learn. And believe it or not, you watch, we get ourselves caught up in this deal, and it's like we're trying to figure that one thing out. I'm going to get the right, I want to get the right answer, the one that matches the back of the book. It's like a simple change of that question changes everything. I wonder what I can learn from this situation. Meaning, I wonder what all I can learn, you know, and that way you walk through looking for lessons. One of my little nutshells says, if you believe that we're here to learn, then teachers are everywhere, and that keeps us, because otherwise, what am I supposed to learn will also keep us stuck, because we're sitting there trying to figure out what some plan is for us to have learned. And I'm pretty sure maybe there are something I'm supposed to learn, but I'm pretty sure there's not a prohibition to me learning many things along the way. So I like the idea of saying, what can I learn from this? All of this talking about just getting out of that victim space where we can move forward with curiosity. And so let's uh, uh, let's look at what we're doing with forgiveness. What we're doing is, and I don't think I should have the book marked here, but this is not an exact quote from Alan, but it's like we're disconnecting others from our unrealistic and unenforceable rules. It's like we're because that's where I'm getting stuck with that. And I want people to know that, forgiveness can be lots of things. I don't think there's necessarily just one thing it is, but it's it, and I don't even think we have to understand what it is while we're doing it. I think that's one of the things that gets us in trouble a lot of times, is our conscious minds are really arrogant. They think they need to be involved in everything. They think everything needs to be their idea, or they believe that all their insights are going to bring about great change. You I don't think so. I mean, think about this. Most great insights, this goes back to suddenly realizing, it's like most great insights come with hindsight. We don't, you don't know that you don't when you're going through a process of growth and you're working on something, whether you're getting sober or whether you're working on learning how to integrate compassion into your life and that kind of stuff, you don't notice the moment that happens to you. You don't go, oh, there it is. It's like what you do is you look back and you say, we're having a conversation with somebody, and you say, huh, for the last couple of weeks, I have not been as hard on myself as I usually have been. Interesting. Well, that's not just because it happened, it's because I'm practicing these things and not necessarily thinking I've got to know it. My conscious mind's got to know exactly what I'm doing. But what I'm doing in this case, I'm disconnecting others. Realizing, because they haven't connected to it. I've connected them to it. You need to change so that I'll be better. It's like, so I want people to know, one of the things about forgiveness is you're not giving somebody something when you're forgiving them. It's like, they're probably they're you can look at it from different angles and have a different view of that. But one of the things you hear in the program that I remember being very confused about early on when I first heard it was that forgiveness is not something you do for the other person, but for yourself. And of course that is it, because basically you're putting down the baggage that you're carrying that stuff around with you, and keeping yourself stuck, or like I said, waiting for something that you have no power over, something that you cannot change at all. You're waiting for that to change. So the idea is we are in fact forgiving, which is a letting go. I mean, that's one of the things that Herb does. I love that thing just with his hand. It's a release. We're releasing, we say we're releasing the person, but we're not. We're releasing ourselves from that. And when we can do that, um, that's where I have the sign on my wall at the office that says, forgiveness is not something we do. It's our natural state when we're not holding on to old pain. And by the way, Alan gives a tremendous example in this chapter, with a woman he calls Victoria, I think, is like uh, just a really heavy duty circumstance with the loss of her child and and disability of her husband through an accident. And it's like, I love that example. And if you haven't read it, you got the book, read it again or something. But I love the example because it's an example of, when you're looking at forgiveness, moving toward what would seem impossible. It's like and we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to move toward what's impossible. Not and we need to learn how to do that in a way that's not, I'm going to do this so that I can do this and this and this and do A, B, and C, and I will have forgiven. You know, it's like when it's as messy as that example he gives in the book, it's like, no, you move forward just to see what happens, see what you can find. It really is just about curiosity. I want to see what happens next. I want to see, you know. And Alan, we can talk about this in a bit if we want to, but it's like, as a therapist, we don't necessarily, it's not like we know everything we're going to discover with the client. We're following the client through that. It's like, I would say, at least for myself, is this piece going to lead to forgiveness? Well, I can have an idea that would be a really nice thing, but if I'm paying attention to the client, I'm going to go where they go, and I'm going to see what they're ready and willing to do. And it's like, that's just about moving forward with curiosity to see what happens. And what you're also doing with that person to help them continue the process of, like Herb says, releasing these things, is letting people know that's one way that we keep moving forward. That's one way that we maintain, um, a attitude of forgiveness. You know, it's like, it's not just, sometimes it's not about, I'm going to forgive you for that. I want to have this attitude of forgiveness. I want to have I want it to be a principle in my life where I say, no, when I realize I'm holding on to something like that, I want to let it go, you know? And it's really important I mean, there's lots of things to look at with disclaimers, but it's not about letting somebody off the hook. It's not about saying I'm okay with what happened. It's like, because we're not. It's like, we're well, it depends on how you define okay. Okay meaning I can't change anything, so I'm okay moving forward. But it doesn't mean, it doesn't imply any approval of what somebody else has done or what has happened. It's just that you can forgive, you can let go, you can disconnect, and somebody say, well, how do you feel about that? Well, it's tragic, and I when I tune back into that, I feel my heart break again, because I can remember the heartbreak of that. And it's like, but there's a difference with that in the idea that I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for that to change, because you know I want that, I I want to be okay because that didn't happen, but it did happen. And Alan did some beautiful work with this particular client. I love the descriptions of it. So if you haven't read that, or if you have read it, you go back and read it again. Um, um, Let me think what else. There's something else I was getting ready to say. It was, yeah, that thing with Victoria was really good. Um, I'll tell you what, I'll just close with this. This is something that as I was doing what passes for preparation in my book, um, I kind of was trying to sum some things up. I love putting things in little nutshells. And what I realized is that emotional sobriety, and this is connected to forgiveness, or maybe it's broader than that, but emotional sobriety requires that we become increasingly tolerant and then accepting of two things in particular: not knowing, comfortable with understanding. I don't know. I can say I don't know, and that's fine. And there's most things I don't know. And the other thing to be increasingly tolerant and then accepting of is the thing that tends to scare us as human beings the most, which is uncertainty. It's a lifelong challenge, but it's like um, most of our unrealistic expectations that put us in distress, make it hard to let go of things, make it hard to forgive ourselves or other people, is the fact that it just really flies all over us, that we don't know what's going to happen next, and we're never going to know what's going to happen next. It's like, um, and we need to, I don't anticipate that in my lifetime I will have perfected that anywhere close, but I can say that working on those concepts, that being more comfortable, I'm very comfortable. I'm actually become quite comfortable with not knowing things and being able to acknowledge when I don't know. I actually see that as a quality of mine, not a deficit, to be able to acknowledge that. But I think the uncertainty thing is a bit of a more of a challenge, and I don't think I'll necessarily ever get over that fear of that entirely. But I've done enough work with it where it I have experienced that life does feel easier when I really remind myself on a daily basis that I have not a fucking clue what's coming next. Because what that does is that brings me focuses right here in the present moment. And all this stuff is about present moment. Forgiving is about, so I got to release this over here. I got to release my useless connection to this situation or this person, so that I can be fully present in the moment. So, amen.
Thank you, Thom. My name is Herb, and I'm an alcoholic. And right out of the gate, you prompted me to write a couple things that are not necessarily connected to what you said and or what the topic is, but your comments reminded me, number one, no one's coming.
Mm-hmm.
No one's coming. And I don't believe there's a plan. I don't think it's a plan. All right. So that's a random thought, but you also connected it to an insight. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And that is the fear that, or maybe the delusional hope that if I hold on to it, perhaps there's some fantasy that I can make it never happen.
Yes.
That was really good. I'd never
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
of it that way. I
Mhm.
mean, it's so subversive and subliminal,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
and so distorted, but I could actually see that somebody needs to become aware of that, the hope of changing my history, that I'll have a better history if I hold on to this thing forever.
Yeah.
And that may be why Fred Luskin stresses right up in the beginning. He said, the first part of the forgiveness process is to acknowledge it did happen.
Mm.
It did happen. It was perhaps unfortunate. It was perhaps tragic. It was perhaps even criminal. But it did happen. That awareness of it, and then you also, and thank you for that, connected it to what we're doing here is emotional sobriety. We're not just randomly picking a spiritual topic out. This is really connected to what Alan talks about in terms of the 12 and 12, in terms of being disturbed. Emotional sobriety is about not being disturbed, because when we're disturbed, especially as addicts, but just as human beings, but especially as addicts, when we're disturbed, we know our default position is addiction, to not become, to tranquilize and to undisturb us, if that's a word. So those two things are, I think, really important. And as you were sort of winding it up, Tom, you mentioned, or at least I made a note of, the total purpose of this is freedom.
Yeah.
The freedom. I mean, of course, it's freedom from them, and that's what amends is all about. And it's wonderful, altruistic, but quite frankly, most of us are very selfish, and we're doing it because underneath, we understand that we'll get free, that we will heal, that there's a benefit to us. So that's really sort of, I'm going to probably stop there because I've got more notes, but it's like, what's the motive? And Luskin has just a wonderful couple examples about forgiveness. It seems so hard, and you don't want to condone it, and you don't want to make it right, and you don't want to reconcile. He said, if I were to offer you $1 million if you would forgive this person, would you forgive the person? It's kind of like, well, make it 10 million. Or on
It's
the other,
interesting for her because I want to tell you the first little guy that spoke in my head was saying, let's see if we can get him up on the price.
exactly. Oh, yeah. No. But then he has another even more dramatic. He says, what if he had a loaded pistol and he put it to your head and he said, you're going to forgive that person or I'm going to blow your brains out. I mean, we're talking about now, obviously silly, but dramatic. What's the motive here? What's the motive? Now, I guess we have to really get tangible with the concept of freedom. What really does that mean? I mean, flags waving in the wind is interesting, but it's not very motivating. What does it mean for me? Freedom. And it sort of paint that picture and vision of, and help somebody else get that vision of, so that they're willing to, and as you stressed, the release, the letting go, and know that it's a choice. There's nothing magical about it. It's a choice. And in the 12-step world, it's a choice that I can make, but I can't affect. I need help. Now, I'm not talking about you guys in therapy and or whatever. I'm talking about a power other than ourselves. In the final analysis, in the 12-step world, the help we need to be able to effect the decision that we make is the spirit of the universe, that energy, that power that will take us across the goal line again. So thanks for
I love that
prompting of the ideas.
thank you, Herb.
Yeah, Tom, I agree. I think that this was a wonderful extension of this concept. I'm okay if
Mhm,
it didn't happen. And
mhm,
that's underneath a lot of stuff, man. You're right. And
mhm,
it's so outrageous for me to put that expectation on myself. And I can see where I've done that. There's no question about it.
mhm,
I'd be okay if my father didn't die when I was 11. I would have been okay
mhm,
then. I would have been okay if my mom would have reached out and comforted me when I needed her the most after she told me he was dead. Then I would be okay. I'd be okay if, right? I mean,
mhm,
but it's true. If this didn't happen, then I'd be okay. The
mhm.
other side of it, I'd be okay if this did happen this other way, right? The
Right.
opposite of it,
Mhm,
right? So
mhm.
it's two sides of the same coin, but it's the same problem, right? As you said,
It's
and look,
conditional. Yeah, it's all
we're
conditional.
not saying that a child has this ability to not think that way. See, should be clear from what I said before when I showed just the cognitive development of children. Children don't have the ability to apply wisdom to their experience. They're children. That's why they suffer what they suffer because their consciousness has no way of integrating the experience, has no way of learning from the experience.
Mhm,
Now, as adults, when we start to grow up and we start to develop a little wisdom, right? And even just a little drop of that can help
mhm,
tremendously in terms of shifting our perspective, in terms of waking up, in terms of seeing the world differently. Like in this, just the whole thing that you said tonight was just such a good wake up call for
mhm,
so many of us, even me. I'd be okay if
mhm,
this
mhm,
didn't happen.
mhm,
My God, I'd be okay if I wasn't born.
mhm.
If that didn't happen, I'd be
That
okay. I
that ought
wouldn't
to
be.
wrap it up.
Right?
All
I
right,
mean,
we're
that
taking
wraps it
care
up
of
right there. I mean,
that.
but that's how it's, but you know what people think? That's when people suicide. I'd be okay if I'm not here. My God. So I might as well get out.
Everybody will be better off. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's the anti-self starts to really believe all that or get
mhm,
us to believe that. So
mhm.
you did a brilliant job tonight, man.
Thank
I
you.
still I will I'm so excited that I still get surprised by you guys and you guys pull these, you guys are magicians. You pull these gems and this
Mhm,
wisdom
mhm,
out of your consciousness and your experiences that
mhm,
continue to show us that getting new concepts and growth is always possible in this on this journey that we're on. So I want to say that, and I appreciate you mentioned that experience with Victoria in the book because
mhm.
that was one of the most powerful therapy sessions I've ever.
That was
I
I
mean,
loved how you wrote about that.
Herb
Yeah.
and I have sat in a few sessions where you just sit there and you cry with people because the pain that they
Mhm,
have and the experience they have is so raw and life is can be so brutal at times in terms of what happens for people and their
mhm.
experiences and that was a very very touching experience, that whole thing. Um,
It's powerful. I've worked with some actually three different families who lost either adolescent or young adult children to suicide, and I mean the pain that is in that room when we're dealing with
oh,
that stuff. I
oh
mean
my God. Oh,
it
man,
is I mean it's I mean when I
I,
say that I can't do it without almost crying and
no,
feeling
I
that
know.
in my
I'll tell you,
chest,
we
you know.
have. You know that. You sit and you cry with people, man. We sit and cry with
Hmm.
them because
Yeah.
it's that gut wrenching. But the other
Mm-hmm.
thing that I wanted to elaborate on a little bit because I love how you tied this in, Herb, about there is a power greater than ourselves that makes all this possible. And
Mhm.
that is that life force. Let's call it
Yeah.
God, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
It moves us towards wholeness. You see, my work, recovery couldn't work if there wasn't that force inside someone that wants that person to move towards being what they can be.
Right.
If we didn't have that force that moves us towards wholeness or holiness, whatever you want to call it, that moves us towards being complete, to actualizing whatever is possible within us, none of this is possible. There'd be nothing to wake up inside of us. There'd be
Mhm.
nothing to attach it to. And how wonderful have we seen when that life force takes hold of people and they allow what Karen Horney says, the constructive forces of the true self, when they become greater than the obstructive forces of the false self. My
Mhm.
God, the unbelievable things that happen. Yeah, now, biblically they talk about it when you let the light of God guide your life rather
Mhm.
than darkness, right?
Mhm.
It's a similar kind of concept in many ways. But what we're talking about is there is a force that when you tap into, man, and you start to listen to it, wow, it moves us in those ways.
Yeah.
I love what Alice Miller says about healing some of the pain of childhood trauma. She says the sun doesn't shine by believing or hoping the clouds are going to disappear. You
Yeah.
have to part the clouds before you can get to the light.
Mm.
And that's the work of forgiveness. That's the work of
Mhm.
moving those clouds.
Mhm.
And it does take some work, man, and it takes a lot of grieving, it takes a lot of crying. Um, Boy, there's just so much to it, But
Mhm.
great job tonight, man. I need
Thanks.
to sign us off a few minutes earlier, so Julia, let's just take us out of the meeting tonight early, and then we'll see everybody next week, and hopefully Tom will be back and join us. Next week will be the wrap up of this chapter on forgiveness, and with me doing a summary and then asking you guys to share some of your experiences with forgiveness.